I have to tell you that what you're about to hear is incredibly disturbing, so I do warn you before you proceed. The video you are about to watch contains themes of extreme violence. This case takes place on the 22nd of April 1974 in Ogden, Utah, USA, and what happened on this day shook the state. A 16-year-old high school student named Courtney Naisbitt had just completed his first solo flight as a pilot. After a successful day, he set off for home, but he decided to stop off at a photo shop to pick up some developed pictures. But to do this, he needed to use the HiFi shop's parking spot while he did what he needed to do. So he got their permission and parked there. When the 16-year-old was done, he went into the shop to go and thank the employees for letting him use the car spot. But little did he know that two 19-year-olds who were part of the Air Force named Dale Selby and William Andrews had run into the HiFi store armed with handguns. The two young men entered just before closing time at around 7 p.m. with intentions of robbing the store. There were two employees inside who were just getting ready to close up. Their names were Stanley Walker, who was 20, and Michelle Ansley, who was 19. Dale and William grabbed the two employees and brought them down to the basement of the store. When these two robbers saw Courtney, they grabbed him and brought him into the basement too. The three of them were held at gunpoint and bound. The men then began to rob the store. There was also a third man involved, named Keith Roberts. Keith was waiting inside of the van, ready for them to make their getaway. After some time had passed, Stanley Walker's father noticed that his son had not returned home at the usual time. So he went to the store to see if everything was okay. His father's name was Ogden Walker. When he entered the store, he was taken hostage too. Courtney Naisbitt's mother, Carol, was also concerned and headed down to the shop later that evening to look for her son, as he too was late home. And unfortunately, she was taken hostage and tied up as well. There were now 5 people tied in the basement. But these robbers had other intentions than just stealing a few electronic items. The two men had been obsessing over a movie called Magnum Force. In the movie, a man kills a woman by making her drink drain cleaner. Dale told William to retrieve something from the van. William promptly returned with a bottle in a paper bag. Dale then poured the contents into a cup, and the cup was filled with a strange blue liquid. He then demanded Ogden to go around all the hostages and make them drink from the cup. Feeling that something was a little off, he refused to cooperate. This angered Dale, so he gagged him and threw him face down on the floor. Dale then told the 5 hostages that the drink was vodka mixed with some sleeping pills. With some help from William, they forced all the hostages into a sitting position and made them drink from the cup against their will. What was inside that cup was not vodka and sleeping pills at all. It was actually the drain cleaner Drano, and the main ingredient in Drano is sodium hydroxide. As they drank the liquid, an excruciating burning sensation began. Their skin around their mouths began to blister almost immediately and began to peel off and ooze. Their skin inside their mouths and their tongues and throats began to blister too and swell up to the point where they were struggling to breathe. But now there was a problem. The deaths were not as instant as they were in the movie they had watched, and the victims were in such agonizing pain that they were screaming loudly. They tried to tape their mouths shut so nobody could hear what was going on, and so they wouldn't be able to vomit up the liquid and spit it back out. But the pus that was oozing from their mouths and lips stopped the tape from sticking. Ogden Walker was the last to be given the drain cleaner, but after seeing the pain the others were in, he managed to avoid actually consuming it by pouring it out of his mouth. He then copied the screams of his son and the other victims, in hopes he could fake his death. But Dale was unsatisfied with the length of time it was taking for the hostages to die. So he raised the gun and fired shots into the heads of Carol and her son Courtney. Dale then turned to Ogden and fired a shot which grazed the back of his head. and then he shot and killed Stanley. Dale then told William to leave the room. He grabbed Michelle and held a gun to her, and he demanded that she removed all of her clothes. And when she did, he repeatedly and brutally forced himself upon her. When he was done, he allowed her to use the bathroom while he watched. He then grabbed the terrified woman, who was still naked, and threw her face down into the floor where the lifeless bodies of the victims lay. He then aimed the gun at her head. Orrin was still alive at this point, and he remembers her crying and begging for her life. She pleaded with Dale that she was too young to die. Unfazed by her pleas, he fired a fatal shot into her head. As the two men were about to leave, they noticed that Orrin was still breathing. So, Dale got on top of him and wrapped a wire around his neck in an attempt to strangle him. When this proved harder than he thought, he placed Orrin on his side. He then picked up a ballpoint pen and placed it into his ear. The pen was upright, with the sharp part pointing down into his ear. Dale then stomped on the pen repeatedly. The pen went in and punctured his eardrum, and went all the way through and came out of the other side of his throat. Dale and William then went upstairs and finished robbing the store before leaving, with around $24,000 worth of stereo equipment. The entire event that had just unfolded lasted around 2 hours. Approximately 3 hours passed before the bodies were discovered. Orrin's wife and son panicked when he too did not come home. When they arrived at the store, they could hear noises coming from the basement. The police were called and the emergency services arrived at the gruesome crime scene. They found Stanley Walker and Michelle dead. Michelle had recently gotten engaged, and the wedding was going to be held on the 5th of August later that year. She had only been working at the store for a week when this tragedy occurred. Carol Naisbitt was still fighting to stay alive, but unfortunately, she died from her injuries at the hospital. Courtney managed to survive the gunshot wound to the head, but unfortunately suffered brain damage and amnesia, and he had to spend 7 months in ICU. Because of his amnesia, he was unable to testify against the people who had tried to kill him. The injuries he received that day resulted in chronic pain for the rest of his life. He passed away on the 4th of June 2002 at 44 years old. Orrin suffered chemical burns to his face and mouth, and he managed to survive the pen being stomped into his ear. He managed to testify against the men, and he spoke of the horror of watching his own son being shot in front of him. He also said that after Dale shot Carol, he got the impression that he was enjoying what he was doing. The day after the robbery, someone contacted the police with information regarding the brutal crime. The man who gave the tip was a fellow airman stationed at the same Air Force base as Dale and William. He told the police that these men had been watching the movie Magnum Force, and what happened in that movie was strikingly similar to what the victims of the robbery suffered. He had also heard the men conversing about a potential future robbery, and he recalled one of them saying that if anybody got in the way of the robbery, he would kill them. After the tip-off from this man, the police went to the Air Force base in search of these men, and they were arrested. After questioning, the getaway driver Keith was also arrested. The police also found the possessions of the victims discarded in a dumpster nearby the base. During the trial, it came out that Dale and William did actually have intentions of killing during the robbery the whole time, and is something they had planned for a month in advance. Their goal was to find a swift and cheap way to kill somebody, and after seeing the movie Magnum Force, they believed that this would be the best way to achieve this. Police believed that there was a total of 6 men that were involved in the robbery, but there was only enough evidence to convict Dale, William, and Keith. The other 3 men have remained unidentified. William Andrews received the death sentence for his role in the robbery. He didn't actually kill any of the victims, but he was an accomplice. He appealed many times, as he believed it was an unfair sentence. The NAACP claimed there were other white criminals involved in similar cases who received lesser sentences. William was executed on July 30th, 1992, aged 37. Dale was given 3 death sentences for each of the victims he killed. Dale said that he found God while in prison, and he spent the last of his days reading the Bible. He was put to death using the lethal injection on August 28, 1987. He was aged 34. When Dale first joined the Air Force, a man named Sergeant Edward Jefferson was found murdered in his apartment. Although there wasn't enough evidence to convict Dale, investigators believe it was he who took Edward's life. Keith Roberts, who stayed in the van during the entire robbery, served 13 years in prison and was released in May of 1987. He managed to stay out of trouble until his death in 1992 at the age of 38. The HiFi murders have been cited as one of the most brutal crimes ever committed in the United States.